You will keep this envelope until I die, and you will not open it before then. Not even a peek, Nora." Those were the last words my mother-in-law ever said to me with her own hands steady enough to hold a pen. 6 months later, sitting alone in my car outside the funeral home, I broke that promise. I tore that envelope open with shaking fingers, expecting a normal will. Bank accounts split fairly, the house going to my husband, her only son, maybe a little something for our daughter for college. That is not what I found. Margaretha left almost everything, the house, the savings, the jewelry that had been in her family for 4 generations to one person only. Not her son, not me. Our 11-year-old daughter, Ren. And there was a condition attached to that inheritance so strange, so deliberate, that I read it 3 times before I understood she meant every word of it. Ren would only receive a single dollar of that inheritance if she changed her last name. Not to Margaretha's name, to mine, to my maiden name. My husband's own mother had written him out of his childhood home, and I was the only person on earth who knew it, sitting in a locked box in our garage for the next 4 months, waiting for a day I was not ready to face. I want to tell you exactly how I got there, and exactly what happened when the truth finally came out in front of everyone we knew. My name is Nora. I'm 39 years old. I work part-time doing the books for a dental office. And for 13 years I was married to a man named Desmond who I genuinely believed was one of the good ones. We have one daughter, Ren, who is quiet and sharp and looks so much like Desmond's mother that strangers used to stop us in the grocery store just to say so. Margaretha adored her. Genuinely, uncomplicatedly adored her, in a way she never quite managed with her own son. Desmond and his mother had what I'd call a functional relationship. Sunday phone calls, holidays at her house. He called her Mom, in that flat, dutiful tone people use when love has calcified into obligation. I never asked too many questions about their history because every family has some old scar tissue, and it wasn't my business to pick at his. What I did know was that Margaretha trusted me, more than she trusted her own son, if I'm honest, though I didn't understand why until much later. She was the one who called me, not Desmond, when she got her diagnosis. Stage 4, pancreatic, already spread. She asked me to drive her to appointments because, in her words, Desmond gets that look on his face like he wants to fix things. And I don't need fixing, I need someone to sit with me. So I sat with her. Every Tuesday for 4 months, in waiting rooms that smelled like hand sanitizer and old carpet, while my husband stayed home telling himself his mother was handling it fine. 2 weeks before she died, lucid and calm in a way that should have warned me something big was coming, she handed me a sealed envelope with a lawyer's letterhead peeking through the top. She made me promise not to open it. She made me promise not to tell Desmond it existed. I remember thinking it was strange, but grief makes people do strange things. And I told myself this was just Margaretha being private about her affairs, the way she'd always been private about everything. I had no idea I was holding a bomb with a 4-month fuse. The first small crack came about 3 weeks after the funeral. Desmond and his younger sister, Priya, were splitting up their mother's belongings, furniture, photo albums, the practical debris of a life ending. Desmond mentioned, almost offhand while we were loading boxes into his car, that he hadn't been able to find their mother's actual will. She must have it filed somewhere with a lawyer. He said, "I'll call around Monday." I said nothing. I kept stacking photo albums into a box like my hands weren't shaking. That was the first time I lied to my husband by simply not speaking, and it turned out to be so much easier than I expected, which honestly scared me more than the lie itself. I told myself I was just respecting Margaretha's wishes. She'd asked me to wait. She hadn't said wait forever, but she also hadn't given me a timeline, and some small, cowardly part of me was grateful for that ambiguity. It gave me permission to do nothing. I put the envelope in a fireproof lockbox in our garage, buried under old tax documents and Ren's outgrown baby clothes, and I told myself it would surface when it needed to surface. I did not yet understand what I was protecting Desmond from, or what I was protecting for him. A week later, Desmond called the family lawyer, a stiff, elderly man named Mr. Halloway who had handled Margaretha's affairs for decades. Halloway told him there was indeed a will on file, drafted and notarized 8 months before her death, but that the physical original had been given directly to a family member per Margarithi's explicit instruction, and he was not at liberty to discuss its contents until that original will was formally presented for probate. Desmond came home confused, almost laughing about it. Some family member has Mom's actual will and hasn't said anything? Who does that sound like to you? He was joking. He assumed it was Priya, or maybe an aunt. He did not, for 1 second, suspect the woman standing 3 feet away from him in our kitchen, chopping onions so I wouldn't have to look him in the eye. I told myself, again, that this was temporary, that I would tell him soon, once the shock of the funeral had settled, once there was a calmer moment to explain that his mother had trusted me with something. What I didn't let myself think about was the actual content of that envelope, because some part of me, some quiet, dishonest part, didn't want to know it yet either. It was Priya who cracked the case open, not intentionally, but the way small resentments always crack things open in families. She'd overheard Ren, in the offhand way children say devastating things, mention to her cousin that Grandma said someday this whole house could be mine if I wanted it. Kids repeat things adults say to them without understanding the weight. Priya laughed it off in the moment, assuming it was just a sweet, grandmotherly promise. But she mentioned it to Desmond that same weekend, as a funny aside, and I watched my husband's face change in real time. He didn't laugh. He looked at me instead. Nora, do you know something about my mother's will? It wasn't a question. It was an accusation dressed up as a sentence, and I felt the floor of our marriage tilt slightly under my feet. I could have told him everything right there. I should have. Instead, I did the thing I am least proud of in this entire story. I said, I don't know the details. I just know she had a lawyer handle things properly, which was technically true and completely, deliberately misleading. I watched relief cross his face, and I hated myself a little for taking it from him under false pretenses. But the pressure didn't stop building. Mr. Holloway scheduled the formal reading of the will for 6 weeks later, once probate paperwork cleared, and in the meantime, Desmond became someone I barely recognized. He started going through his mother's old boxes obsessively, looking for clues, for context, for anything that would explain why an original will had vanished into some undisclosed family member's hands, instead of sitting safely at the lawyer's office like it should have. He'd come home from his sister's place with theories. Maybe an old boyfriend of his mother's had it. Maybe it was a cousin trying to angle for money. Every theory he floated, I had to sit across from at dinner and nod along to, agreeing that yes, it was strange. Yes, someone should say something. Yes, whoever had it should come forward, all while that someone was me, sitting there passing him the salt. The worst part wasn't the lying. The worst part was watching him grieve his mother and simultaneously grow paranoid about her, watching those two feelings tangle together into something ugly, and knowing I was the one feeding both of them by staying silent. Every night I told myself tomorrow I'll tell him. And every morning, tomorrow became today, and today became another day I couldn't find the courage. Then Ren, completely unaware of the storm she was standing in the middle of, asked me a question over breakfast that nearly made me drop my coffee mug. Mom, if Grandma left me her house, do I have to be a Kessler forever, or can I still be a Whitfield like you? Whitfield is my maiden name. She'd clearly overheard something, some fragment of a conversation with Priya's kids, and she was asking with the casual curiosity of an 11-year-old who has no idea what she's just detonated. Desmond, sitting right there with his cereal, went very, very still. What did you just say? I watched my daughter's face crumple slightly under the sudden intensity in her father's voice, and every protective instinct in me screamed to shut this conversation down immediately, to protect her from being caught in the middle of something that was never supposed to involve her at all. But it was too late to contain it. Ren, stammering, explained that her cousin had said something about Grandma's will, saying she'd have to change her name to get the house, and that she didn't really understand what that meant, and could someone please explain it to her? Desmond looked at me across that breakfast table with an expression I will never forget as long as I live. It wasn't just confusion anymore. It was the specific, sick dawning of someone realizing the person closest to them has been lying to their face for weeks. Nora, he said, very quietly, in a voice that scared me more than shouting would have, "Where is my mother's will?" I told him, right there, standing in our kitchen with our daughter watching. I finally told him everything, that Margaretha had given me the envelope herself, sworn me to secrecy, and that yes, I had opened it after she died like she'd asked. And yes, I had known the contents for months and said nothing. I watched something in Desmond fracture in real time. Not just anger, betrayal, layered on top of grief, layered on top of the specific horror of learning his own mother had chosen his wife over him for this. He didn't yell, that was almost worse. He just asked, in this flat, hollowed-out voice, "What does it say?" I told him the condition. The house, the savings, the family jewelry, all of it to Wren, contingent on her legally changing her surname from Kessler to Whitfield before her 18th birthday. If she didn't, everything would be liquidated and donated to a women's shelter Margaretha had quietly supported for 15 years. An organization Desmond didn't even know his mother had ever donated to. Desmond got exactly $1. One single, symbolic dollar. The kind of number lawyers use specifically so no one can claim they were accidentally forgotten. His mother hadn't forgotten him. She had made an active, deliberate choice to give him nothing, and to make sure everyone would know it was intentional. He stood up from that table so fast his chair scraped hard against the floor, and he left the house without saying another word to either of us. He didn't come back that night. Or the next. 6 weeks of frozen silence followed, punctuated by short, clipped logistics where he was staying, when he'd pick up his things, whether he'd be at the formal reading of the will. He was staying at Priya's. He wasn't speaking to me beyond what was necessary for Wren's schedule. I spent those 6 weeks doing something I should have done months earlier, actually thinking hard about why Margaretha would do this to her own son, instead of just following her instructions blindly like a good, obedient daughter-in-law. I started going through old boxes myself, the ones Desmond had rifled through in his paranoid phase, looking for the piece I was clearly missing. I found it in an old shoebox of financial documents, tucked behind photographs. 7 years ago, before Wren was even born, Desmond had convinced his mother through weeks of pressure. According to letters she'd kept, to take out a second mortgage on the family home to fund a business venture with a college friend. The venture failed within 18 months. Margaretha had nearly lost the house entirely, had spent 5 years quietly rebuilding her finances from near ruin, and had never told anyone, including me, because she didn't want her son's mistake following him around like a public stain. She forgave him. She kept having him to Sunday dinners. But she never trusted him with money again, and apparently, she'd decided she couldn't trust the house to him either, not after watching him nearly lose it once already. The name change condition wasn't cruelty. It was insurance, a way of making sure that if Wren ever inherited that house, it would come with a legal firewall between it and any future financial trouble her father might drag into their lives. I finally understood. But understanding didn't make the timing feel like anything other than a wrecking ball through my marriage. The formal reading of the will took place in Mr. Holloway's office, but Desmond's sister, Priya, in what I can only describe as an act of quiet, righteous fury on my behalf, insisted the extended family also gather afterward at her house for what she called a conversation that's been 6 weeks overdue. So we all stood in Priya's living room: Desmond, me, Priya, 2 aunts, and Desmond's uncle Roland, who had apparently known about the old mortgage disaster the whole time and had simply never said anything, the way families do. I stood up in front of all of them, and I said the thing I'd rehearsed 40 different ways in my head, and never quite gotten right until that exact moment. I should have told you the day I opened that envelope, Desmond. I was wrong to sit on it for months, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise or ask you to just get over it. But I need you to understand something too. Your mother didn't cut you out because she stopped loving you. She cut you out because 7 years ago you nearly cost her everything, and she spent 5 years quietly cleaning up a mess you don't even know she cleaned up alone. She wasn't punishing you from the grave. She was protecting your daughter from watching history repeat itself. Desmond went completely white. He looked at Roland, who finally, reluctantly, confirmed every word: the second mortgage, the failed venture, The 5 years of Margaretha working 2 extra shifts at the pharmacy just to climb back out of the hole he'd put her in without ever telling him she was in it at all. I watched 13 years of my husband's understanding of his own mother collapse and rebuild itself in front of an entire room of relatives who'd apparently known pieces of this secret longer than I had. "She never told me," he said, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "She let me think everything was fine. She protected you from feeling like this," I said. "The way you're feeling right now? That's exactly what she was trying to spare you from feeling. She just didn't realize protecting you would mean cutting you out completely." Ren, who Priya had wisely kept at home for this part, never had to witness that conversation, and I made sure she never fully understood the ugliest layer of it, that her own father had once nearly bankrupted the woman who loved her most in the world. Some truths are not a child's to carry. Here's where I land now, on the other side of it. Desmond and I are still married, technically, and we're trying, in the slow, clumsy way people try after something like this cracks a marriage down the middle. He understands why his mother did what she did. He even respects it, in the quiet moments when his pride isn't in the way. But something between them will never get resolved now, because you cannot apologize to someone who's already gone, and you cannot ask forgiveness from a grave and expect an answer back. That's the part he carries now, and I watch it sit on him some nights like a physical weight. Ren will inherit the house on her 18th birthday, and she's already told me, with the blunt clarity only an 11-year-old can manage, that she doesn't care what her last name is as long as everyone stops fighting about it, out of the mouths of babes. As for me, I still don't know if keeping that promise to Margaretha for those first few months was loyalty or cowardice. Maybe it was both. I think about her handing me that envelope, trusting me with something she couldn't trust her own son with, and I wonder if she knew exactly what she was setting into motion, or if she genuinely believed the truth would land softer than it did. So I'll ask you what I still ask myself most nights. If someone you loved handed you a secret that would protect your child but shatter your marriage, would you have opened that envelope the day she asked you not to? Or would you have waited, the way I did, and let the truth detonate on its own schedule instead of yours? Tell me what you would have done in the comments below. And if this story kept you up wondering what you'd do in my shoes, stick around tomorrow. I'm telling you about the wedding where the maid of honor read the groom's real love letters out loud. And trust me, it gets worse before it gets better. Like this video, subscribe if you want more stories like this one, and I'll see you tomorrow.